You are listening to a panel conversation recorded live on Tuesday, the 30th of September 2025, following the performance of Punch at the Apollo Theatre, Shaftesbury Avenue. The conversation is part of the After the Punch series curated by the Forgiveness Project. The speakers are Sandra Barefoot, Jo Berry, Marina Cantacuzino, and Julie Hesmondhalgh.
Thank you so much, everybody, for staying with us. Welcome to this first post-show discussion of a series of 9 that we have been curating. It feels a real honour to be on this stage with you all, having just watched an extraordinary play. My name is Sandra Barefoot. I'm the Executive Director of the Forgiveness Project, and I want to introduce you to my panel. So this is Jo Berry, who has been a storyteller for the Forgiveness Project from its inception 20 years ago. And she is also the founder of Building Bridges for Peace. This is, as we know, this is Julie Hesmondhalgh, who is an actor, and also she has become the patron for the Forgiveness Project. Can we give her a big round of applause again? Thank you. Thank you for joining us, Julie. And Marina Cantacuzino is the founder of the Forgiveness Project. Please welcome Marina to the panel. So I just want to briefly let you know the Forgiveness Project, if you don't know, is a charity that was set up by Marina. And it's a charity that looks at the opportunities and the resources to explore the complexities of forgiveness. We are rooted in the belief that stories have the power to transform. We have collected stories for over 21 years. These stories, we have 170 storytellers in our community so far. Jacob and Joan Scalfield and Jacob Dunn, who you've seen tonight, have been our storytellers since 2014. The stories we tell are restorative narratives. The stories are there to look at what it takes to heal, restore, and rehumanize ourselves and others. So I want to say one other thing about this as well. We sit in the grey. We do not ask anybody to look towards forgiveness or not. What we do is we sit in this place of question and curiosity and wonder. We do not sit in the black and the white. We are not in the binary. We want to ask these questions. How does it make it possible to even consider this path? So I want to come to this first. We're going to do 3 questions, and then I want to come for any questions you have. And the first is looking at this. Punch started last year at Nottingham Playhouse. It went to the Young Vic, and today it's in the West End, and while we're here, it's also on Broadway in America. I want to ask this question to the panel, is to say, what is it about this play, the elements of Punch, that makes it so universal to audiences and brings standing ovations every night? What is it about this play, and why now? So can I come to you first, Marina, and then I'll come to you, Julie?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Sandra. I mean, I really believe this play is for our time. If you think about it, creative expression thrives when things fall apart. And I would say that things are falling apart. And when you don't have trust of the media or of politicians, the arts can fill the space. And I think theatre, above all, somehow seems to reach the parts that nothing else can. And it can become a place of resistance or resilience, a place of hope. And at these times, I think we crave these kind of stories. I see them as stories of hope in very dark times, and that's what the Forgiveness Project has done. As Sandra says, we collect restorative narratives, which are stories, real stories, that heal, restore, and reform. And the reason why we do it is that again and again and again, we've had people come to us and tell us that these stories just help them deal with the pain in their own lives. And we've seen how these stories can break open closed hearts and prise open narrow minds. And you see it in this play. This is exactly what this play has done. And when I think about when we first saw it in Nottingham, it was extraordinary. It was like tonight, actually. You know, there were so many tears. People felt connection. They wanted to talk about it. They didn't want to leave the theatre very often. And I think that's because people are just crying out to have these themes brought into their lives. It helps people overcome differences and overcome defences and build connection. I think that's the role of this play.
Thank you so much, Marina. Julie, you have been with the play from the inception.
Yes. Yeah, the cast that you saw tonight made the show in Nottingham with Adam Penford, our wonderful director, and James Graham, the writer. And it's a hard question to answer, actually. You answered it beautifully, Marina, about what it is that why people are coming out to see this. And I think exactly what you said. I think people at the moment, in these very dark and divisive times, need hope and need connection. And I think also there's a deep worry and concern for our young people and how we are collectively failing them on every level at the moment. And I think this play really speaks to that in the way that adolescents stayed on the TV and had that incredible response to it. I think people want to know what is happening for our young people and how we can change things. And I think also it's a very invigorating thing to be challenged in the way this play challenges you and to ask yourself the questions that it forces you to ask yourself about what you would be capable of, good and bad actually, that you put yourselves very squarely in the shoes of both Jacob and Joan. You know, it's not a binary thing. You think that could happen. I have done things that could have gone wrong. It could have turned into a different direction. And by the same token, would I be able to sit with the person who took away the most precious thing in my life and not only forgive them, but go on to campaign with them? And I think that in these times when we're seeing the very worst of people, I think it's very good to see the very best of people. And I think that's what this play presents.
What a beautiful response, Julie. I hear so many people saying, how is it possible to do that? To step into the shoes of another. And I think it's exactly that. People question, I could never do that. That Joan is an extraordinary person, and yet we have so many people, we just don't tell the stories of people who are doing it differently. So I want to come to you, Jo. You're one of our storytellers. What's the element, what do you think about this play, and what makes it universal for you, Jo?
I think this play, I agree with everything that's been said. It brings hope. You know, we're often told they're baddies and goodies, wrong ones, good ones, and this shows that the humanity of both sides, and that we could all be each person. And what is possible after so much hurt, so much trauma, that it is possible to heal, it is possible to move on, that the punitive way doesn't give that sense of moving on that the restorative way does. It's the power of restorative, which is not blaming, not shaming, the listening, the communicating, talking about needs. It's so real, and that play conveys it in the most incredible way. It's the first time I've seen it, so unlike these two, I'm still so emotional after it because I resonate with so much in it, as you know.
Thank you so much. I love the way you say that as well, Jo. We're not blaming and shaming. The restorative process is absolutely looking at what's happened. The question that we never tend to ask, what happened? How did you get to this place? So that's wonderful you said that. I want to ask this next question, which is, Jo, I'm going to come to you first because Jo has been on a long journey for 25 years. And I want to ask this question that many people would ask is, how is it possible to even embark on this journey of understanding in the first place? What is it that brings us to forge that place, to want to find understanding?
Well, there's a different answer for everyone. So I'm here as someone who facilitates these kind of meetings, done many, but also someone who's done my own process. So I'm just going to speak for me. When my father was blown up in a terrorist attack when I was 27, I didn't want anyone else to feel that pain. I wanted terrorism to stop. I wanted war to stop. I wanted us to find other ways of communicating. And as part of that dedication to give up revenge, to find a way to bring something positive, I met the man who killed my father 25 years ago. I didn't go for forgiveness. I didn't go to tell him he was a bad man. For me, it was that understanding. He was the most demonized terrorist we had at that time, and I wanted to see his humanity. I wanted to hear his story. Because if I could see him as a human being, that would rehumanize something the bomb took from me. And I imagine it was one off meeting. I'd meet him, and I'd never see him again. But what happened was that he then began to see my dad as a real human being. And the nature of a lot of crime, a lot of conflict, a lot of war, is that we don't see each other as human beings. And that rehumanization has carried on, and we've become friends to show what is possible, that hatred doesn't work, violence doesn't work. What works is really listening and seeing each other's humanity.
Thank you. Thank you. Beautifully said, Jo. Thank you so much. Joan, I'm really moved by you're listening to Jo there, and you are playing the character of Joan, and you have had a huge process with Joan, who has been in the rehearsal period with you. Still to this day, a friendship has formed between the two of you. And in that journey you've had, what have you understood of the possibility that allowed Joan to take that journey towards understanding?
Well, I think the play tells Joan's story very clearly, actually, and I don't want to speak for her, but I think that she said this on record so many times that for her, she was being eaten up by bitterness. She didn't recognise the person that she was. She was incredibly angry and resentful that Jacob's sentence was so short. She didn't think it was enough for the life of her wonderful son. And it wasn't getting her anywhere. And this is what I've come to understand through the Forgiveness Project, that forgiveness isn't a wafty, sort of liberal notion that that you sort of bestow this like kind heart on somebody. Sometimes it's about survival. And the people that I've met through you on the various panels that we've done in Nottingham and in Young Vic and here, it's always come back to that in order to survive, you have to let go of something and see the humanity in the other person. And I think that is why they reached out in the first instance. And I think it's fair to say that it saved John and David to an extent, but John in particular's life. And James, as you hear in the play, was an amazing young man. He volunteered with disadvantaged young people in North London. He was a trainee paramedic. He lived his best life. He was the best version of himself. And she wanted to honour him by living the kind of life that he would have wanted. And to me, that's incredibly inspiring.
It's a beautiful line you say in the play, Julie, about James would not want me to be this person. He wouldn't like who I'm becoming. Beautiful. Marina, I'm going to come with this third question, and then I'm going to come to you for questions. It's around forgiveness. What does this concept of forgiveness bring up for us all? And I come to you as the founder. You have done so much investigation for 21 years in this concept. And I just want to come to you first. What does it bring up for us?
Yeah, well, I was particularly interested. It comes in the penultimate scene, so in a way very late. And in some ways, it's the most important theme because that's what you're left with. That's what you'll talk about afterwards, perhaps. But in other ways, it's the least important theme because actually the journey towards compassion and understanding is really what the whole play is about. But I found that interesting because it's quite contradictory in a way, and that's what we find with forgiveness. It's hard to pin down, it's slippery, it's easily misunderstood, it's open to interpretation, it's not always welcome and it's not always appropriate, and it's multifaceted. And I think the scene that is so powerful, I think, because there's every aspect of forgiveness in there. There's Jacob very tentatively asking for forgiveness, being granted then by Joan. But David can't, and I think probably most of the audience will relate most to David. But then, what I'm really interested in, people are very keen on explicit concepts of forgiveness. They want it to be defined and written down, and philosophers and psychologists are doing this all the time, but actually what about the non-verbal? What about the expressions? What about body language? And it's all there with David. And in fact, when he reaches out to shake his hand right at the end, that is an expression of forgiveness, if you like. So it exudes the whole play, forgiveness. And yet I think James Graham wrote it very subtly, because you do not want to be preached about forgiveness. We know that at the Forgiveness Project. And I think, you know, it's a beautiful theme within this, and it'll make you think, and you'll go away thinking about, what is it? Would I? Could I?
Thank you, Marina. Joe, I want to come to you because you have been someone I've always, in the prison work, we run a prison program, I've always quoted Jo because she's never used the word forgiveness. It's not been the word for Jo. It's been the word of understanding. So I just wanted to come to you to kind of express that not use of that word and the use of understanding instead.
Yes, I do find understanding and empathy, and I now call it unbounded empathy, much more relevant to my own experience. And I believe everyone has a story, as this play shows. There's reasons why everyone does things that they do, but quite often we just label people and don't get curious and don't look what is behind the behaviour. And for me, forgiveness is still maybe keeping someone with that label, but me telling myself, I'm such a good person, I can forgive you, but I can still make you someone who's not a nice person. Well, to me, empathy just liberates me, because then I understand that if I'd been through all the things you've been through, all the difficulties, all the challenges, would I have made that choice? Would I have done that thing? And in the moment, there is nothing to forgive. And that to me is working with people, which is like the restorative way. And the understanding frees from a sense of like power over you, or I'm better than you. And actually we're all human beings struggling with our own stories.
Yeah, that's... thank you. I always quote Jo in the prisons when I say this thing, if I had lived your life, if I was in your shoes, I could have done what you had done. I might have done what you could have done. Yeah, thank you. Is there anything else, Julie, what in this concept of forgiveness, what does it bring up for you? And
well, it's been a complete education for me being in this play, because I mean, like many of us here, you know, I find it hard to forgive a slight on me sometimes. You know, someone just doing something like, you know, a bit annoying, and so for me, this idea of it has very much challenged me, and I've brought this because I know Marina won't plug it, but this is Marina's book on forgiveness, and it is absolutely astonishing. It has Joel's story in it. It has John and Jacob's story in it as well. And it's a very, very thorough look at what forgiveness is or isn't, and very much inspired by Desmond Tutu. And I'm very interested in how we can use some of your philosophy and your understanding and your deep thinking about these issues on a global scale as well, because obviously that is where it becomes very, very difficult when you're asking people to forgive other people who've done terrible things to you know, your entire community, and how we move forward through that is a very, very tricky thing to talk about when there's so much anger on both sides. But I feel like this book is a little bit of a Bible for it, and I would really recommend it to anyone who's interested in these themes and who wants to know more.
thank you, Julie. I would say when we put the word forgiveness in a room, sometimes it scuttles out under the door, because it's not the right word, and because it's always attained to religious and we have to do something you should and ought. And other times that word stays very close to us in this room, and people want to explore it. And people often misunderstand forgiveness as being a weakness, as something that allows for that behaviour that has happened, that you're forgiving what happened.
Well, in the book, Marina, you talk about radical forgiveness, this idea that's wiping the slate clean, and you make a real distinction, don't you, between that and saying, no, our idea of forgiveness is much messier, and you're right in there in the mud with it, and it's much more difficult and can take years to work through in some way.
Lovely. Let me come to the audience. Let me come to you. Are there any questions that you have? And we have a couple of roving mics. I can't see. Could we put the house lights up? Is anyone? Because I can't see you. Great. I've got a question over there. Let me come for any. We have about, I think, 10 minutes, I think, if I'm right. Yes, please speak.
Oh, hello. Thinking about both the perpetrators and the families of the victims of violent crimes, I was wondering if you could say something about shame, self-blame, and self-forgiveness.
Yes, we've done a lot of work looking at self-forgiveness. Many of us would say might be the hardest thing ever to do. But let's look at shame. I think shame and self-forgiveness are explicitly linked, and to work with shame. Can I come to you, Jo, with this?
No. Yeah, I think that's a really important question. And I worked a lot in prison with people who are there for homicide, and the shame makes it very difficult for them to hear the impact of what they've done. Because there's the wish to justify, the wish to minimize. And I think shame is the root of a lot of our problems we have in the world. And I have my own shame. I have my amazing 3 daughters here, and I've at times hurt them through my actions, through my words, never meaning to, but I have. And I know the shame in me that makes me not want to hear the harm I've done. It's the hardest thing sometimes to really hear, actually, yes, I have messed up. Tell me how you've been impacted. Tell me how you feel. What can I do to make this better? And I have to take a good look at my own shame and acknowledge it and hold it and make sure it's not leading in how I do my repairing harm conversations. And I see shame everywhere in the world right now. Shame can turn to anger, shame can turn to violence, also the internal violence. And the only place I will use the word forgiveness is for myself. Can I forgive myself? And these days I'm getting a lot better at it, but I'm still learning. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can we take another question? Thank you so much, Jo. Yes, please.
Jo, you spoke about
Is there a mic? Yeah, no, go on. I can probably. Thank you.
You spoke about empathy and being able to come to speak to people with empathy and forgiveness, or not forgiveness, with empathy and understanding and curiosity, which I think are really important words. But I was just curious to know whether, Julie, having worked with Joan and for yourself and probably for the hundreds of stories that you've heard, whether you think there is a type of personality or a way that you can get to that headspace, because I can't imagine that that's something as humans that we naturally want to step into. So how do you step out? How do you take that step outside of that place of, I'm going to be curious, I want to put myself in that other person's shoes?
Marina, can I come to
I
you?
think I often say that pain is the greatest motivator to forgive, and to go on that journey of understanding. But that's because there's a great line in the play where Joan says, nothing is working. And I've heard others say that. Those exact words have been said to me by other victims of hideous crime. And so you can deal with pain through self-medication, through denial, through self-harm, through taking revenge. And then you find often, it seems, that you're not getting anywhere, or stuck. That's another word, isn't it, that Joan uses. She's stuck, doesn't know where to go. So then it sort of prizes open your mind. You start to think differently. And this thing about curiosity, which Jo mentioned, is absolutely key. Until you want to know about the lives of people different from you, you're stuck in rigid thinking, which is the trap of certainty and intolerance. But you need to have a broader vision of things. And this is like, Joan was so full of anger, you said. But then it shifted through seeing Jacob as human, basically.
And do you think there is a type of person that couldn't get to that place? Is everybody capable of it? That's kind of what you're asking, isn't it? It's like, is everybody?
Probably everyone is capable, but it would take completely different things in different scenarios. And maybe actually, I don't know, Jo, what do you think? I think maybe some people wouldn't want it and would never want it. So there's a spectrum there.
Yeah, I think people need to be listened to before they reach a place of curiosity. There are a few people who straight away move to curiosity, but for a lot of people, timing is really important. People need to be heard in their pain, in their grief, with their anger, just witnessed and heard. And I've seen so many times people who've, after being listened to, they reach a place inside themselves where they're suddenly more resourced and they can then start thinking something different. But in this, there are no rules. The timing is completely different for everyone. And I do believe that there are some people who perhaps will never get to that, perhaps because there's too much trauma. But there's always that hope that people will change. and to create safe spaces for people to be heard to me is the most important thing. I think right now we need a whole national listening in this country to really listen to people, even those we disagree with, but there's so many feelings around, and just to be listened to. It just will calm things down, and once people feel heard, they're less likely to hate. I really do believe that.
Could I just put a word in there for restorative
absolutely.
justice at this point?
Yes, please,
just
Julie.
because I know that was the way to this, and there's a lot of misunderstanding about what that process is as well. And me and Jacob were talking earlier about it, and about a certain kind of person who thinks that restorative justice is, you know, the easy thing for criminals, you know, and it's kind of like letting them off the hook. And again, in the book, it says that, you know, criminals, you know, people who have been perpetrators of crime have said they would go to prison any day of the week rather than sit and have to look into the eyes of the person that they've harmed. That is a much tougher thing to sit through. And Jacob's campaign at the moment, which I'd love to mention, he started a campaign through his charity Common Ground, which is the right to be heard. And he wants restorative justice to be offered to every victim of crime, because it is a process that is there for the victims of crime, you know, essentially, but it does reduce reoffending by huge amounts because of the humanising of people. When you eventually, if it's possible, get into that room together, you start seeing each other as human beings. So I would really, you know, I'd plead with you to please find the campaign and sign the petition. I know Jacob will be really happy with me for saying that.
Yeah.
Yes, can I add that? I agree. I'm so passionate about RJ. It's incredible, and the amount of victims I've listened to, and maybe they don't even get to meet the person for all sorts of reasons, but they often say, this is the first time someone's listened to me, and that helps. And then I've been in so many meetings of face-to-face, and the victim just says, I never got my voice in court, I never could say this, and now I've got my answers, I can move on. And it's the most incredible process, and it's a humbling, it's a privilege to be a facilitator for those processes. And if any of you want to get trained, I know there are places right round. It's an incredible thing to do.
And the one thing I wanted to say is because there's a real tension between forgiveness and restorative justice. They do not go together. A lot of people can misunderstand. What do you think? I'm going to forgive that person for doing something so horrific and ruining my life. And you want me to forgive them. There's this misunderstanding. They are completely separate things. We often say it might be a byproduct. It might be something that happens, as we saw in the play. You know, Joan's journey towards forgiveness is something that she grew into. And David didn't, and he's in the place of understanding right now. But they don't come as a requisite of restorative justice, and that needs to be really clear, because people often put them together and they're miles apart, and we need to take care of that, because then no one will meet the other thinking, I have to forgive you. And there was one thing I wanted to say to you, Jo, when you said about this place of forgiveness. You were on your own. You took your own path. None of your other family members did that. I'm really aware so many people like you in our project is that they're on their own in their families, and that's a big risk, because some people can feel like other family members can feel they feel betrayed, like you're going this way and why, and this place of belonging to our tribe can keep us stuck there, and it takes a lot of courage to step out of that. And I just thought Jo is one of those people who did that. And Joan, you know, it takes a lot to do that. So I just wanted to mention that. I'm just going to get a time check because I don't have a watch on me. How much longer do we have? 2 minutes. Lovely. Is there one more quick question? Yes, just there. I can just take it very short. And
yeah, very, very quickly. Having grown up, been born at the year this trouble started, I just want to thank you, Jo. And I just want to say your 3 beautiful daughters, in the 5 seconds that I met them, are incredibly proud of you. It's been an amazing evening. I want to ask the panel, what, for the rest of us, what is the one small thing you would like us to leave here doing that maybe we haven't done before we saw this show?
Mm-hmm. What a beautiful question to ask. Who would like to answer that one? You have 1 minute.
Well, I've got to say it.
What's the one
I've got to
thing?
say it. Only because the stories on the Forgiveness Project, my background's journalism, but the vehicle is the stories. They've taught me so much. Just go into the Forgiveness Project website, just randomly look at a story and see if there's that you get something from that. And
share them with others. But I want to come to Joe, because I'm sure Joe's going to say, well, I don't know.
Well, it's what I say to myself, like, every time that I get that sense of self-righteous anger, and like, oh, I'm part of the moral good people, these people around me, how are they behaving like that? Then to give up being self-righteous and become curious and wonder, what is the story here? What is happening? What is the story? And I think if we did that more, and we didn't believe the stories we are told about other people, we'd have a very different world right now. So get curious. At the same time, always looking after yourselves, because that's the most important thing.
And Julie, can I give you one? Thank you so much. One word.
There's a line in the book that is hurt people. And I think exactly what Joe and Marina are saying is just try and look at the storyline underneath what's going on. You know, a lot of us who would have met Jacob, you know, when he was out in Nottingham back then, would have had a real idea of who he was, and I would have had no idea of this like deep and deeply thinking person who would go on to change the world in many ways. And you just sometimes got to look beneath the surface of what is absolutely in front of you. I'd say that.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. As I want to give a big round of applause for our panel, Joe Berry, Julie Hesmondhalgh, Marina Cantacuzino, and I just welcome all of you. Please come to theforgivenessproject.com. Find us there, read the stories. Please become a supporter. Subscribe to our newsletter and just become part of our community. We welcome you to us. And thank you so much, everybody, for staying with us. Thank you.